Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Dynamics 365 Intelligent Order Management. My name is Erin, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. The session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during the presentation today. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Lachlan Cash, Principal Program Manager, and Sammy Sid Otmain, Fast Track Solution Architect. Lachlan, over to you to kick us off today.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. My name is Lachlan Cash, as Erin mentioned, Principal Program Manager. I'm from the engineering group that is building the Intelligent Order Management solution. And Sammy, my counterpart, is from our Fast Track team that we collaborate with in terms of custom implementations. So today we want to take you through Intelligent Order Management, which is a new solution. Working with the Fast Track team, they do have implementation guides, and this is a reference here that has good references to checklist, product guidance, general guidance on how to implement solutions. So it's a really good reference to look at when you're looking at the Dynamics products and how to implement those and manage those implementations. So today we want to take you through an overview of Dynamics 365 Intelligent Order Management, why we built it, the intended sort of target, the solutions that we're trying to cover. We'll take you through a demonstration, what the product looks like, an end-to-end scenario of how the product would be used, the architecture, if you're looking at building around the solution, extending the solution, the basic concepts of the architecture, and then we'll finish with some Q&A time to answer some of your questions that might come up through the presentation. So let's get in. We really wanted to focus on the digital transformation that customers were going through, and from an intelligent order management perspective, focus on how you can engage with customers. And that's really looking at that order management process in delivering products and fulfilling those products. We saw a lot of change over the last couple of years for many different sort of reasons. But over a longer period of time, we see customers changing their business models, looking at their supply chains, traditionally maybe being a manufacturer selling to a distributor through to a retailer. But now with the ability to use marketplaces and e-commerce technology, you have the ability to sell direct. And we see customers changing their business models, changing their product mix, and looking at new offerings that they might be able to sell direct as a new portfolio sort of offering. And so those combinations increase the amount of channels that you sell through. And so we were looking at how do we help customers dealing with those multiple different channels, evolving business models, how to adapt quickly when you want to choose the best of breed solutions to deal with engaging customers, managing your back-end supply chain and connecting those all together. And so looking at those, need for routing orders through the fulfillment supply chain process, dynamically sort of reconfiguring as you make application choices at the front end, solution partners at the back end, internal software that you might use in the fulfillment, and looking at new ways to get to customers in terms of embracing sort of evolving e-commerce and market spaces. We looked at kind of the capabilities that we think a solution needed and based on the feedback that we were getting from customers. So we really wanted to sort of model the order journey. We realized that, the business process that you have, varies based on type of orders, where they come from, different divisions, different products. And so we know having a fixed business process is not right for a lot of companies. They need to be able to change those business processes. And so we wanted to do that to also model the events. If an issue happens through that order fulfillment process, how do we respond to that event? When we get a notification from a fulfillment system, a delivery system, how do I respond to that and have automated business rules? Because we don't want to apply just more people to deal with those issues. We want to apply automation to that process. And so we can do that through events. Now, we know customers have the choice to pick the best of breed software that they might want to use for different parts of that order fulfillment process. And so we wanted to have an easy approach to turn on those connectors or providers to different systems. We wanted to also scale out based on customers that we were working with. For example, in fast moving consumer goods, we're talking about millions of orders a month, for example, that needed to be processed. And so we wanted that ability to scale from small businesses all the way up to the enterprise. But Microsoft offering this as a SaaS solution, the SaaS solution would provide that scalability, and you just need to focus on the business application and what it is that you're implementing. So we wanted to be able to have a configurable solution and not have to deal with coding to change the business process rules and conditions. And now through that process, we also wanted to build in intelligence. Gathering data through that order management fulfillment process can allow you to make real-time decisions, but also long-term planning decisions and feed that data that you're capturing into planning systems. So we're doing that based on looking at technology like business intelligence, but also machine learning, and how can those machine learning models like classification be used to classify orders and therefore make decisions through the process. So that measurement and analytics through the core of the system is really key. And so we wanted a solution that wasn't dependent. We had customers that weren't Dynamics customers coming to us to say that they need this capability, but they weren't ready yet to replace their other ERP. They liked Microsoft Dynamics offerings. And so that was a key capability. We work with our existing Dynamics products, but also work with in an environment where Dynamics may not be already deployed. And that's a key capability. This is a capability that can stand on its own. And so from that perspective, we introduced intelligent order management. So that is a new product SKU within the Dynamics family. And the reason for doing that is that we do work with our existing solutions, which is our Dynamics supply chain, commerce, finance, for example. But we also work with all of the other applications in terms of customers that might be using our Dynamics sales and customer service might want to add fulfillment capabilities for when they're working with 3PLs, for example. So they need a mechanism to get those orders out to 3PLs that might originate in sales. And so therefore we wanted to have different models of how customers can use the solution based on what they're using. And you may not use any Dynamics products. And so therefore you can adopt this to work with other ERPs and other e-commerce systems, as we'll see through the demonstration. And so intelligent order management being a solution built on the Microsoft Power Platform. And this was really a key initiative for us in terms of we wanted to provide that business focused application, but we wanted to give the power of the platform, the integration technology, but surface that in the context of the business application process. So we're really using that rich capability. And you can use that to extend the solution, which is the Power Platform, use that for the analytics tools, use that to really look at your overall application landscape and choose the elements that you need to use within your business. And so we'll see that as we go through the solution in terms of how the Power Platform comes alive in the context of the business application. But of course, we are a cloud-based SaaS solution running on the Microsoft Azure platform. So this gives you the ability to reduce that IT administration, the management, because it is a cloud solution. You can deploy quickly, configure quickly, and then get up and running to solve a business problem. And that's really what we're trying to address for customers, is that ability to solve a problem and have a solution that can be up and running quickly. So from a business process point of view, when we look at the different order sources, I might be taking orders from e-commerce channels. I might have multiple e-commerce channels. I might be working with marketplaces like Amazon's or the evolving retailers like Walmart or Target that are evolving to marketplaces. How do I take orders from different channels, still keeping maybe traditional EDI channels, maybe taking orders from portals or apps that you've built in-house, and so therefore consolidate those to have a centralized order management platform that you can centralize those business rules. No matter where the order comes from, you can start to process it and make decisions. And so the flow here is that orders can come from any different sources. They'll get registered in the database, the common data model of the order, which is our common data model. That triggers events, which can trigger the orchestration process, and therefore you can have common rules, make decisions based on wherever this order is coming from, and determine where you're going to send it from a fulfillment perspective. And so therefore, you're based on the product, based on the division, whatever your business rules are, you might have different ways to handle that. And that's where we also wanted to provide that optimization within that order orchestration to make decisions around what's the best way to fulfill this based on how you're organizing your physical supply chain and delivery partners. So from that perspective, the solution footprint of intelligent order management is essentially this birthday cake solution as we're presenting here. We have providers that allow us to connect to different order channels, like we talked about e-commerce, EDI, different CRM or sales apps or marketplaces or apps that you've built. Centralized through the provider infrastructure, can trigger actions through our order orchestration process. And there can be actions through that we might need to call out to other services like tax, for example, or pricing engine. Again, what we're trying to do is look at the overall order process and the abstraction of those functions that you might need to call through the order processing as you get this out to fulfillment providers like warehouse systems, 3PLs, point of sale systems, where you're implementing solutions like buy online, pick up in store type scenarios. All we need is a provider connected to those systems. The decisions can be made where you're going to send it based on the rules. Those rules are facilitated by a couple of microservices that we ship with the application. One of them is a real-time inventory visibility service. This gives us the ability to take inventory in from different sources, whether it's ERP applications, warehouse systems, point of sale. So we have a single inventory view, and we can use that through the order promising processes through the orchestration journey. As well, we might need to make decisions around fulfillment optimization. So we have a fulfillment optimization engine that can be used. This gives you the ability to look at capabilities like least cost, least distance. So I can look at the order address and determine the closest fulfillment location based on the inventory that I have. And then the communication out to that warehouse system can be done through the providers. So that's essentially the concept. Let's jump across and have a look at what the solution looks like in action. So I'm looking at the solution here. This is our Dynamics 365 Intelligent Order Management app. And through the apps, we have insights dashboards, we have providers, we have views of the orders and fulfillment, the orchestration setup. We have master data like customers and accounts, and we'll have a look at those, and then setup and configuration like our fulfillment. So let's have a look at a process here. If we have a look at our catalog of providers, in this example, I'm showing some of the providers that we've shipped and some of the providers that we still have some work in progress in terms of just about to release, for example. So in this example, we've shipped providers like BigCommerce or Flexi, which is a fulfillment warehouse. And so a provider does the job of communicating to that system And so the idea there is that we want to make it easy. If you want to turn on that connection to an e-commerce system, I can click on that. I can provide my store information in terms of a parameter connection API key, and therefore we've already done the work in terms of looking at the events that might come from that system, the transformation that might happen in terms of when we take an order in from that system, and we need to communicate a status back to that system. We might need to transform the messages, and then that can be done through the concept of our transformation engine. And so we wanted to provide transformations for common systems, in this example, BigCommerce, but also provide application functionality like how do we map accounts, products, units. And so we'll talk about this when we go through the process as well. So essentially a provider, if we ship it, that's what we wanted to provide, is an easy way to turn that on and a connection to that system. But the same technology that we're using as Microsoft to build providers, customers can also use, and business partners can also use to ship providers as well to customers. And when we're encouraging partners to also build these providers to enable the ecosystem of providers that customers can use. So let's have a look at how this might work in terms of an order coming from BigCommerce. I'm going to jump across to BigCommerce here, and BigCommerce has the ability to have a store. I'm just going to use the backend functionality to quickly put in an order here. And so I'm going to pick an order for Sam. He's one of our developers in our product group, and I'm going to put a product on this order from BigCommerce. Now, I've put in the SKU number here, which is ABS. We'll talk about this mapping in a minute, but this allows me to find this product on BigCommerce. I can click next, confirm the details, and we're just going to process a manual payment here so that we can get the order in. Now, the key here is that this is our order number 850, and so what's going to trigger now is the orchestration process. And so if we have a look, this is really where the rules and the business process comes into play. What we have the ability to do is use, for example, our policy engine as the order comes in and the event is triggered. In this example, a new order being triggered. Now we can have one or many different orchestrations. And so we have orchestration template processes for orders and also inventory flow if we need to move the inventory from an external system into our inventory service, for example. But when the order comes in, for example, it might come from different sources. We can validate that in terms of the header information, the line information, based on policies we have. So the execution policy is what can be triggered, determined conditions of how this order can be processed. Now, in this example, we could take orders from many different sources. It might have come from EDI, for example, and we have an EDI provider configured in this example called Order4. This allows us, if we're taking an order from EDI as well, we could trigger an EDI acknowledgement to be sent back to say that we've got the order after we've done some validation on it. So this gives us the ability to take an order from e-commerce, as we've seen through BigCommerce, but also it could have come from EDI, but I can have a centralized process of rules where I can determine what happens to that order. Now, the flexibility, the orchestration designer means you could split them up. You could have many different flows just based on your business units or types of products. Now, in this example, as a demonstration, the order would come in. We may need to validate tax on that. And so this is a good example of an order action in terms of we can call other services through that orchestration process, like calling Avalara for tax validation. And then this allows us to use the functions on those services, like Avalara has the ability to calculate tax, but also validate addresses, for example. And so we can use those external systems that you choose, that you might use for your business through that overall order process and compose those together. And so in this example, we're going to determine the fulfillment location, and this is provided by our fulfillment configuration. So our fulfillment engine, we have a strategy, and this is the rules of how do I process my B2C orders, for example, based on the constraints that we want to process. What sources am I going to look at in terms of the destination? So sources could be a store, it could be a warehouse, it could be a vendor location. The connection between the fulfillment location is really done through that provider. So the provider does the job of connecting and communicating. And so in this example, we're using Flexi as our warehouse provider, and so we'll determine the warehouse. We can use additional providers that might help us determine carrier information. For example, we could use ShipStation to print a shipping label, or I could use Uber to go and get freight details. But in this example, we're going to use Flexi to actually ship the order. So the order can go out to the fulfillment provider, and once they've shipped, we can get a condition back to say that it's been shipped, and therefore we can communicate that back out to either to our partner through EDI or to that e-commerce through the status update, in this example to BigCommerce. And so the idea there is that these orchestration flows you can build yourself, and they're done by providing actions. And this is really what we wanted to be able to do, is for the business to configure those business processes. You might want to validate the order. I won't go through and fill out all of the properties, but just to give you the idea of how does the flow get built. I might want to validate and assign a fulfillment source. I can communicate that to the fulfillment system, and therefore I can update the order status. So essentially the actions are what you pull together. The available actions are done by the providers that you have in your system. So once you've configured providers, and those actions on providers is essentially what you're configuring to choose the communication. So ultimately what we're doing here is the communication, and these actions are essentially API calls. They're being used through the connectors, and that connection framework is provided by Power Automate. And so what we'll do is we wanted to provide this simple business process view, but underlying it's a really complex communication that's happening, and we wanted to abstract and provide that abstraction from the complexity. So we take these when this business flow is published, we actually build these into Power Automate. So the underlying engine that drives this orchestration is Power Automate. Now, if I've talked for a little bit, 850 was our order. So let's go and have a look at our orders here. So we wanted to provide that order view. So you'll see, for example, that order has come in from BigCommerce. So this is our order 850. And so we wanted to really provide that centralized view. We know you've got the ability to choose systems that make sense for your business for order, delivery, fulfillment, but we wanted to provide that centralized view of the statuses of what's really happening with that order throughout your organization. This gives customers the ability to deal with the exceptions. Use the orchestration to automate as much as you can in terms of business process, and have your people just deal with exceptions, and really that 80-20 rule, and automate as much as you can in terms of getting orders through your organization. So the visibility you'll see here in terms of the events that happened on this order, which is a new order has been processed. We've validated the header, the lines. We've done the tax. We've worked out the fulfillment. It's ready to be fulfilled. We're looking at the carrier determination, and so essentially the business process is being executed, and so therefore now if I refresh, you'll see that the send to fulfillment is the next part of this, and so essentially we have that visibility to what's happening with that order in this complex communication between different systems. And so this allows you to use this data for communication, whether it's to internal people or whether you have other systems that might email directly to customers. You've got that data that you can provide that communication mechanism. Now, if you are using other Dynamics applications, as intelligent order management is a Dataverse application, let's say, for example, I'm using our customer service application or our sales CRM, as a customer using those other applications, then if I go and look at the context of a user like a customer service rep that might be using these applications, if I go and have a look at the orders, and we go and bring up our all orders, let's search for our orders in the context of this application. I can see that we have our order. I can see the status now in the context of our CRM application and see that it's been sent to fulfillment, meaning that our order here has now been communicated over to our warehouse. If I look at our warehouse here, let me just log in. So this is Flexi that we're using, which is a 3PL in this example to ship our orders. Then our orders now over at the warehouse and they can ship it out. And so this is really a key capability that we wanted to provide, is that we know it's complex and we know you have choice to use the right supply chain partners and systems in your business. But we wanted to make it easier to communicate and connect with all this complexity and give you that order visibility of really what's happening with the order through this complexity. So if you wanted to surface that to customer service reps or use this data to use in virtual agents or email systems to communicate, you have that status information to determine what's happening. Now, this order would be now fulfilled. So we have a concept of a fulfillment order. So if I go and look at fulfillment, obviously we'll need to wait for that warehouse one to be processed and shipped. So let me have a look at an order that's already been shipped. So if we look at shipped orders, we have a concept of a fulfillment. This gives us the ability to look at your orders coming in and how do we fulfill it? I could, just pass that order through. So a fulfillment order gives us the ability to split, maybe product A goes to warehouse A, product B goes to warehouse B and fulfilled by different systems. We have that flexibility through the rules in terms of how you want to process those. And so in this example, the fulfillment order, we can see what's happening in terms of the fulfillment's been shipped. We can give you a visualization, and there's certainly partner providers that provide additional information that we're working with to give you that delivery visibility. In this example, we use ShipStation to print a shipping label. I have that tracking ID, which gives me the ability to see that tracking label. And so once I have the ID, I can use that with the providers to do delivery tracking and therefore drive additional communication to customers in terms of how is that shipment progressing, and that you can use and keep that communication going to the customer. Now, a lot of, as we saw in the orchestration, we have these conditions we call policies. And so this gives us the ability when we do validations through those policies to look at the rules. So as data comes through, we can have conditions, and these conditions can be built. So for example, I can look at any attribute in the order and determine flagging the order source for it if I use that for different types. So that's our policy engine that we can use for you to build conditions on how the orders move and how to determine them to move through to fulfillment. Now, we did want to provide insights, and so again, for those teams in the organization looking at the exceptions, we wanted to provide dashboards. Driven by Power BI, we have dashboards to give you the overview of the orders processing, where are you shipping, types of products, and you can use this for then optimizing the orchestration flow And so order insights, product insights, give you that visibility to really what's the data that's being driven through your system. As well, a fulfillment dashboard, which gives you the ability to look at the fulfillment lines and metrics around those. And so we wanted to provide those insights to really allow you to understand what's happening within that context of that order through fulfillment process flow, and so you can use those to optimize your business process of driving that fulfillment. So the key of looking at, for example, if I switch back in this particular environment, look at the events, we really wanted to allow you to focus on the exceptions. If something didn't happen through that orchestration, what's failing, what are my back orders, what are my orders past due, you can build those rules and therefore give you that ability to focus on the orders that you need to drive that customer service. So that's really the key goal of intelligent order management, is really to provide that visibility to the orders in this complex world of connecting systems together. Now, one thing maybe just I forgot to show as we were before I jump back to the slides, you saw in the order as it came through, we do have the ability to configure mapping. So that order as it came through came from BigCommerce, and we used a product code like ABS, for example. But internally, we think of the product SKU as AccuScale. And so when we send it out to Flexi, which is our warehouse, they treat it as a different number. And so we wanted to abstract some of those business administration configurations so that the business users can administer those, and they're called from that technical transformation when those documents are coming in from the different systems. So things like account mappings, products, again as well, we know when orders come from different system, it might have an order number in one system. You might have a different number when you send it to a different system. So we have that ability to map, business data, reference data as we move it between different systems. And so this is really a key capability for us. The other thing is the inventory visibility is a core service. We touched on the configuration of the fulfillment service, but the inventory visibility gives you the ability to bring in data from different data sources. It might be my point of sale system. I might be using SAP, so I need to bring in my inventory from SAP, and we can aggregate the measurements and the dimensions from those different systems together to have a calculated view measure of what's my on hand. And this can be calculated by adding together the different data sources. And so I can add and subtract our measurements to determine what's on hand, and we can use that as we go through that order orchestration process to look at what inventory I have, make decisions and optimizations on where is my inventory and where's it best to fulfill this order from. So that's some additional sort of configuration in terms of what we're trying to provide in terms of the system to have that central visibility of the orders going through. Now, from a technology point of view, as we saw in the demonstration, we are using Dataverse. So Dataverse is that core database cloud solution that gives us that visibility, common data model that we can store these orders in. The orchestration is provided by Power Automate. Again, we wanted to abstract the complexity for the business users, but give the extension capabilities. If you want to use connectors that are available, you can wrap those connectors up in a provider, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The Power BI gives us those intelligence dashboards, and we are working on machine learning models provided through AI Builder, for example, to classify. A common example is fulfillment risk. Can we use attributes of the order to determine a fulfillment risk? And that's a model example that then can be used to attribute the order, and we can make decisions through that order orchestration as it goes through. So those are some of the technology components. Let's have a look at the architecture in a bit more detail of the providers. And so providers essentially allow you to connect to those different systems. So it allows you to use the power of the Power Platform, which is the connectors that are available in the Power Platform, but you can extend those, and that's really designed for scale. I'm communicating with many different systems and driving those APIs between different systems. So the core architecture is really broken up into three components. Our data pipeline, which handles the communication inbound and outbound to our different systems. And this is run by Power Query. Power Query is our engine that allows you to do the transformation. And we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. The orchestration engine is what we saw with the orchestration designer. We take that business process view and we make it and compile it into Power Automate. The insights are driven by Power BI for the analytics, and machine learning from the AI Builder, for example, which are Power Platform components. So the data pipeline gives us the ability to handle data movement. So essentially it's the integration piece that provides that communication mechanism between the different systems that we're talking to. The mapping and transformation is provided by Power Query. We saw that briefly when we were looking at the connector, the BigCommerce connector. It gives you the ability to transform documents. And so the providers that will ship will use that ability to have common mappings between different systems, but that also gives you the ability to change those mappings. If you need to do that for your business, you can obviously change that. Or if you want to build your own providers, you've got that full capability to transform the messages between the different systems. These data pipeline is driven by Power Automate. So the connectors, and we'll talk more about that, is what is a provider. So a provider definition is essentially the Power Automates that enable the actions and the event handlers. These are connected to the connectors. So a connector on Power Automate gives us that API wrapper. So I might be calling a system through a simple HTTP post, for example, or I might be using an existing connector to an Oracle database or whatever it might be to communicate to that other system. So a connector does that job of calling those APIs on different systems. The connection information on that connector provides that security credentials, and then we use those within the intelligent order management application to do the transformation, raise business events, which trigger the orchestration, and you might have parameters. We saw that in the configuration of the connector on BigCommerce. I can just provide my store number when I set up that connector, and then we're up and running in a few clicks to connect to BigCommerce, for example. So parameters that I might need to provide to different systems. It might be my account number for a delivery service provider. So there's parameters that you can configure on those providers. So they do the job of wrapping up and communicating to the external system. Now we realized that there might be one technology solution that we're talking to, like an e-commerce system, but you could have different instances of those e-commerce systems. And we've seen that often with customers where they have potentially a product store on Shopify or BigCommerce to do one product or a different market segment. So you might have actually many different stores. And we wanted to cater for that because you can configure providers as many times as you need to configure the instances of those providers. So you may have actually many different connections to a certain platform. We've also seen that where we've got customers that run across different countries. So I might use the same software but in a different country, and so therefore I wanted to have a unified view of the orders from different countries, and so I could have different e-commerce systems, but you can bring them back into a centralized system like order management, and therefore make decisions through that business process of how you handle those orders. And so as we saw in the demonstration, we had an order coming from an e-commerce system. So when we look at that process flow, the order is received. That triggers an event through the provider actions. That event is raised and therefore can be executed by the orchestration. We can make decisions about where do we send, in this example, through to fulfillment, which raises the event to communicate to that fulfillment provider, in this example asking the fulfillment provider to ship that order, and therefore then we can get order status back, and then we can communicate that back all the way to the e-commerce system. And so those actions through those providers, the events and the orchestration, give us the ability to coordinate those communication mechanisms across these complex systems. And that gives the operational team that visibility of what's happening with that order, and making sure we're communicating status out to the right system that needs to know, whether that's internal operational teams or to the end customer, in this example through the e-commerce store. When we have a look at the orchestration, the orchestration engine is really doing the job of moving and making decisions based on what I need to do within my business process. So that's really what we're providing, that orchestration designer. So that's our orchestration services. We take that and we essentially compile that into Power Automate. And that gives you the ability to look at and define that business process rules. And is that definition that we can use for the execution and tracking of that order through the system. So that's really the job of the orchestration engine. And so as you saw, this business process view gets compiled into Power Automate, and that really does the job of the communication. So actions on orchestration can be many different actions. As you saw in the example, we called Avalara for a tax, for example. And so we'll provide connectors that might provide those order type functions that you might use for like address validation, pricing systems, tax systems. And we know as Microsoft that we can't build all of the providers because partners have specialized knowledge of their system. And so the same technology that we're using to provide providers, partners can also use to build their own, to offer to customers to extend the ecosystem of providers. So that might be for systems like denied party, credit checking, integration with payment systems, for example. So that same architecture, that same architecture you can use to build providers, whether that's to an in-house system if you're a customer wanting to build your own provider, or a partner that might want to build a provider to offer to customers. So data management is provided, as we saw through the demonstration. We have a common entity model you can use to bring data in. That common data entity model, we're looking at the order, and so the sales order, sales lines. We added a new entity, as you saw through the demonstration, called the fulfillment order. Fulfillment order is really that entity to track what's happening with the shipment or how that order is being fulfilled. But of course, the underlying data Dataverse platform has the data model for system data like units and currency, master data like account and product. Now, Intelligent Order Management has the ability to deal with if you want to bring those products into the data model to use for validation. As we saw, we've got an external code transformation system, so you can map product IDs or account numbers. But if you know the originating source and the destination source, those numbers are already configured. You don't need to bring that product data on. You can just simply pass the order through. So that might be valid in some situations where you're just taking a product number and you're going to send it over to a vendor because they're going to drop ship the order for you. So many different ways to configure and how you manage the data, but that underlying data model is there in the Dataverse data model to allow you to look at that master reference data as you might need. And we use that through the insights and analytics. So essentially, the Dataverse data can be published out to Power BI. You can use the Dataverse connectors to build your own dashboards and therefore combine data from other systems that you might need. So the order data that you're capturing in intelligent order management combined with other platform data, and you can build your own dashboards with Power BI, for example. The AI scenarios, because AI Builder is connected to Dataverse, if you want to build your own machine learning models to look at the data as it comes through, you have that ability to use those platform components to provide those insights. So we'll surface those in the context of dashboards, as you saw. Now, we wanted the ability to have different models, so where we intended intelligent order management to fit, and the example that we showed was from an order coming from an e-commerce system and sending it out, IOM being in that middle. In this example, sending it into Dynamics, but this could be SAP, or this could be Oracle, for example, or whatever ERP application that you might be using. As long as we have providers, ION can play that job of getting that order into the different systems. So whether that's CRM sales applications, sending that out to fulfillment, applications that you might build like a Power App, IOM can be used to communicate through point of sale system, drop shipping to external vendors, as long as you can communicate, which might be through an EDI provider to send that order to a vendor or a direct API call to the vendor. EDI, as we saw through the example, we used Orderful in that example to get orders in and communicate out. Communicating to external fulfillment systems from your ERP application. I might want to send it to the external warehouse like we did in that example to Flexi, which is a 3PL. Communicating between different business applications, between different instances of applications that you might use across countries, different types of applications like we have within the Dynamics family. We have our Dynamics F&O based applications or our Business Central based applications, and you might have multiple different business applications in your environment, and this gives you the ability to have a centralized view and then work out which application you're sending the order to. So we envisage a lot of different models where IOM can be used in environments. So we touched on the fulfillment optimization. I won't go through too much more detail on this one, but really that engine that we saw is looking at the rules of how does an order move through, how do we look at the address and determine what warehouse or store or fulfillment location we might ship from, so that least distance if we have inventory in multiple locations, to determine what's the best way to fulfill that order. So these are really driven by our constraints of what conditions do we want to check. So those rules are processed through that orchestration step there. The inventory service gives us the ability to look at storing inventory from many different systems, and therefore we can use that on hand to have that visibility to make decisions based on where our inventory is as we send them out to the fulfillment location. So that's a key capability. Now you may use this to bring inventory in. That inventory might be mastered in your own ERPs, but at least you have the ability to bring that in, and we can make decisions in real time on what inventory do we have within our supply chain. So that essentially leads us to our Q&A time. I did want to point out that the product I'm using, if you want to go to dynamics.microsoft.com, you can look at the intelligent order management solution there. If you want to deploy a trial, it takes a couple of minutes. You can sign up for the trial there. So that environment that I was using, you'll get the same capabilities. You can go and configure, for example, BigCommerce connector in a trial with BigCommerce, for example. You can be up and running fairly quickly. The system deployment we wanted to make really easy, so you'll see that through the trial. It'll take a couple of minutes to deploy the environment, give you sample data, and therefore you can experience that there. So the link is on the Q&A side. If you find that through Dynamics, the longer link to get to that page is simply there. But with that, I'll introduce Sammy. We might have a look at a few of the questions that might have been generated through the course of the presentation.
Hey, thanks, Lachlan. Yeah, we had a good set of questions today from the audience. I'm going to start with the first one, which is regarding the availability of IOM in India, and if we have any roadmap information.
Yeah, it's a good question. So intelligent order management is available now. If you want to experience it, you can certainly use the trial if you're not ready to purchase. But we have been working with customers for a good amount of time to take requirements, and so we are what's called GA, which means that you can actually purchase the application now since August. And so it is available now that you can either trial or purchase after you've experienced the trial. We certainly have a roadmap, you know, and we'll continue to take feedback from customers through our normal feedback mechanisms like the ideas portal and the customers that we're working with. So we do have a roadmap to add you know, additional functionality through the order orchestration process, add additional providers, add more intelligence and insights. And so we'll continue to do that through our regular sort of spring and fall releases in the regular Dynamics update cycle as we go forward. But the application is available now for you to either trial or purchase.
Yeah, we'll share also a link for the regions, actually, availability regions with the coming months. Thanks, Lachlan. The next question from Kirk is to know whether the F&O connector will actually rely on dual write, or we will have it as a provider like for other connectors.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the connector to the F&O products like supply chain is going to be based on dual write. The reason for that gives us the ability to use that mechanism that's already in place to move data backwards and forwards. We are looking at, you know, how do we provide automation? We have customers, for example, that might be using Dynamics for product A and a different system for product B. And so when the order comes into intelligent order management, we'll filter so that we can use the validation events to determine maybe the whole order doesn't need to go to Dynamics. I'll create an order in Dynamics, but it only needs to have one product line, not both product lines, because the other product line needs to go to another system. So we do want to provide additional sort of pre-processing function in those complex environments. And so therefore, when the order is ready to be moved to F&O, then dual write is the technology to move it. And so that's the basic sort of premise of the F&O connector at the moment. We can certainly use other technology to call APIs on F&O. That is something that we're looking at for potentially some other status updates. But at the moment, the direction on the F&O connector is through dual write. Yep.
Thanks, Lachlan. Another question is to know Next to the order integration, do we also need to build separate integrations for products and accounts, or should that be done with the mappings shown earlier?
Yeah, so the basic life cycle is you have a lot of tools in the Dataverse to bring the products and accounts in. You can bring them in through Excel. You can use the data pipelines available in the Power Platform to move the data. If you do need to map them, we wanted to provide that simple mapping from a business user point of view when we're dealing with many different systems. So that's additional functionality that we've provided on top of the platform to be able to map those IDs. But you do have that ability to bring that account product master data into, if you want to use that for validation. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Lachlan. Next one, does IOM enable for omnichannel sales and return scenarios across different legal entities?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's the concept of organization was one reason that we looked at creating a centralized order management solution, because we know we had customers that potentially had different instances of their ERP applications, so they wanted to provide a centralized view and then work out where that order needs to go. So from that point of view, that's one of the capabilities that we wanted to provide in terms of I could take orders from many different e-commerce systems, and then based on the conditions and rules, I'll determine where that's going to go to move it into Dynamics if you're going to use Dynamics or a different ERP, and therefore you would use those organizational concepts when you send that to the other ERP. So therefore you have a centralized view of those orders from wherever they're coming from and where you're moving them into. You probably don't have a lot of time to sort of talk about organization concepts in Dataverse, but that's certainly something we have a couple of notes about in our documentation page about how some of those organizational model concepts work. Yep.
Got it, thanks. We're getting, sorry, I'm just going to the list of questions. Well, I'll be replacing distributed. Okay, we have a question here. Will IOM be replacing the distributed order management feature of Dynamics 365 Commerce in the mid or long term?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the so distributed order management that is in the Dynamics supply chain and available in the Dynamics Commerce product. We've worked with the commerce team. When I was talking about the fulfillment optimization engine, that's essentially the functionality for DOM or distributed order management. So we've worked with them to make that a microservice. So that is a component piece that you get when you purchase intelligent order management. So it's doing the job of determining the fulfillment location if you want to use that component. But the overall solution of order orchestration is what we're trying to provide. So from that perspective, DOM, if you're a commerce customer or a supply chain customer, you do have that ability to use the DOM X++ capabilities within the core application. But if you want to use order management, then DOM is essentially a new microservice that we're shipping with IOM if you want to use those rules to make fulfillment determination.
Thank you, Lachlan. An additional question here regarding licensing. Are there different license possibilities? One scenario you mentioned is, for example, if you only want to use it for tracking orders and notifications from different carriers and not receiving the actual orders.
Sure. Yeah. That the key there is that if you want to build providers or use the providers that we have, essentially we're calling those APIs. And so how you represent the data or how you use that data can certainly be up to yourself in terms of you know, what status information you want to update backwards and forwards. So you certainly do have the flexibility in terms of what makes sense for your business to use of that data, for example. As an example, we wanted the ability to you know, have a scenario where, for example, a Dynamics customer might be using the advanced warehouse in Dynamics Supply Chain to ship an order, but the communication to delivery they want to track with the solution, and therefore the order could be tracked with the intelligent order management solution with the communication to that delivery provider, and so we wanted to provide that flexibility of however you want to organize your systems based on the architecture that makes, you know, sense for your organization. It gives you that flexibility.
Not sure if we still have some time for an additional question.
Maybe let's just do one more and then.
Okay. Then I'm sorry, just trying to look for a question with an answer already.
No, that's cool. Maybe we can wrap it up, just seeing we're pretty close to time,
Yeah.
Sammy. I see you answered quite a lot of questions through there. So yeah, we really do appreciate everyone listening in, and you know, thanks for your time. So we'll hand back to Erin and Emily to close out.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Lachlan. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like your feedback on today's session, and we would love to hear what you'd like to see in future events. We thank you in advance for your participation in taking that survey for us. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters today, and of course to the audience for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you may be.